We can't hold them! To the river!
In early 1942, as the smoke of conquest still drifted across Southeast Asia, the Japanese Empire stood at the height of its wartime expansion. British positions had collapsed with stunning speed in Malaya. Singapore had fallen in humiliation, and the long retreat through Burma had shaken imperial confidence to its core. The British Empire in Asia, long regarded as immovable, suddenly appeared fragile. In London and New Delhi, officials struggled to grasp the scale of the disaster unfolding across the eastern frontier of India. Historically, the mountains and jungles along the Indo-Burmese border became a barrier that halted the Japanese advance. Supply lines stretched thin, monsoon rains turned roads into rivers of mud, and the logistical demands of pushing deeper into India proved overwhelming. But imagine, for a moment, that one crucial variable had changed. Imagine that Japanese logistics held together just long enough. And that British defenses faltered just slightly more. In this alternate path, the frontier that was meant to protect India instead becomes a gateway. By late spring of 1942, Japanese formations that had fought through Burma regrouped near the frontier. Their commanders, emboldened by rapid victories elsewhere, argue that the moment is ripe to push forward. Intelligence suggests British forces in eastern India are scattered and demoralized after the chaotic retreat from Rangoon. The region of Assam, with its strategic railways and airfields, appears vulnerable. Tokyo hesitates briefly, aware of the risks, yet momentum, ambition, and the belief in British weakness combined to produce a fateful decision. In this scenario, Japanese units move through the dense hills toward the Indian border before the monsoon fully sets in. Supply columns struggle along primitive tracks, but they hold together just enough to maintain the advance. When the first Japanese troops cross into Indian territory, the event sends shockwaves through British command structures across South Asia. What had once been a distant battlefield is now an invasion of the empire's most important colony. The British Indian Army is vast on paper, but in early 1942 it is still recovering from the disasters in Malaya and Burma. Units are reorganizing, reinforcements are arriving, and training programs are still underway. When Japanese forces push toward the frontier towns, the defenders face an enemy whose reputation for speed and coordination has already become legendary. Communications falter, orders arrive late, confusion spreads through the defensive lines. News of the crossing travels rapidly across India. In Calcutta, officials confront the alarming possibility that the war has reached the subcontinent itself. The city, already strained by wartime shortages and political unrest, becomes a center of anxiety. British administrators fear not only military defeat but also the political consequences of appearing unable to defend India. For decades, the British Empire had projected an image of invincibility across Asia. That illusion had already been damaged by the fall of Singapore. Now the presence of Japanese forces on Indian soil threatens to shatter it entirely. Across the subcontinent, nationalist leaders observe events with intense interest. The question that begins to circulate in political circles is simple but profound. If Britain cannot defend India, can it continue to rule it? The Japanese leadership understands the psychological dimension of their advance. Tokyo's propaganda machine begins broadcasting messages aimed directly at India. Radio transmissions promise liberation from colonial rule and claim that the arrival of Japanese forces signals the beginning of a new Asian order. These messages find mixed reactions. Many Indians remain deeply skeptical of Japanese intentions. But the mere existence of an invading Asian power challenging the British alters the political atmosphere. Within the British command structure, the crisis forces urgent decisions. Reinforcements are rushed toward eastern India. Airfields in Assam become critical hubs for supply flights and defensive operations. The Allied command begins redirecting aircraft and troops that might otherwise have been sent elsewhere in the global war. The defense of India becomes a top strategic priority. Logistics, however, remain the central problem for both sides. The terrain of northeastern India is among the most difficult in the world for large military operations. Narrow mountain roads, thick jungle, and unpredictable weather complicate every movement. Japanese forces advancing across the frontier discover that success creates its own difficulties. Every mile forward stretches their supply lines deeper into hostile terrain. Yet the psychological impact of their advance is undeniable. The mere fact that Japanese troops have entered India forces the British Empire onto the defensive in a region it once considered secure. London worries that a prolonged crisis could ripple outward across the empire. If India appears vulnerable, what message does that send to other colonies watching the war unfold? The United States, newly committed to the war after Pearl Harbor, also begins to view the situation with growing concern. American planners see India not only as a vital allied base but also as a critical link in maintaining pressure against Japan and China. If eastern India were destabilized, the strategic balance across Asia could shift dramatically. Meanwhile, within India itself, the political landscape grows increasingly volatile. The independence movement had already been gaining momentum before the war. Now the presence of a foreign army on the frontier intensifies debates about India's future. Some argue that the crisis proves British rule has failed to protect the country. Others warn that the chaos of war could make independence even more dangerous. British authorities respond by tightening security measures and emphasizing the need for unity against the external threat. Yet these efforts cannot entirely suppress the growing sense that the war has opened a new chapter in the history of the subcontinent. On the battlefield, the initial Japanese push begins to slow as the realities of distance and terrain impose their limits. Allied reinforcements gradually strengthen defensive positions deeper inside Assam. Air power begins to play a larger role as Allied aircraft challenge Japanese movements across the mountains and valleys. The conflict along the Indo-Burmese frontier evolves into a tense and uncertain struggle. Neither side can easily achieve a decisive breakthrough. Yet the strategic consequences of the initial Japanese crossing continue to reverberate far beyond the jungles where soldiers maneuver through mist and rain. For Britain, the crisis becomes a stark reminder that its imperial defenses are no longer guaranteed. The war in Asia has transformed from a distant campaign into a direct challenge to the empire's authority in its most prized colony. For Japan, the advance into India offers both opportunity and danger. A deeper push might threaten British control across South Asia, but it also risks overextension in terrain that punishes every logistical miscalculation. And for India itself, the moment marks a profound turning point. The war has reached its borders, and the balance of power that had defined the colonial era is beginning to shift. In this alternate 1942, the crossing of the Indo-Burmese frontier does not simply mark another military maneuver. It becomes a symbolic rupture in the old imperial order, a moment when the certainties of empire begin to dissolve under the pressures of global war. What follows will determine not only the outcome of a campaign, but the future of an entire region poised between empire, invasion, and the uncertain promise of independence.